No, it says the stop button on the menu bar. So,
Menu, help.
yeah, I don't know what the deal is,
Oh,
but
maybe
Oh,
that,
file, go to
Maybe
file.
that hand.
no, that's not. See, file won't work because it's all grayed out. So I will figure it out. If
Maybe
worse
the
comes to
magnifying
worse,
glass.
no, I think what it is, in all honesty, is I think that I have to. If you notice, you guys over here can see this. As soon as I project it on the screen, I have black on the sides of my screen. I think if I unplug it, it spreads out and I'll see it. I think that's the issue.
try.
Well, I don't want to do that now because then I don't no longer have it on the board. So we'll get this going. Now, first things first, let's talk about yesterday's quiz. Go through the questions. By far, the question that stopped people from getting 100, number 5. Number 5 was the most difficult question of the bunch. Did you hear what you just said?
So you didn't get it right?
I got it right, but I didn't put a negative. So you should have said I got it wrong because I forgot to put a negative. Or I would have gotten it right if I would have remembered. Okay,
I don't understand the English.
all right, so
I love that.
I feel like an idiot.
Tap now. Tap
Every
now.
time this goes on, I feel like a monkey.
Tap now. Yeah, tap now.
Because it's like the monkey following the plastic thing on the board.
Oh.
Konnichiwa.
But I just emailed the technology department and said, how do I get this that I don't have to do this again? Because there is a setting to do that. All right, so the very first question says, I gotta get my old people glasses on.
Oh, they're magnetic.
Yep, they are. -3 plus -2. And what does -3 plus -2 add up to, everybody?
-5.
-5. And you guys did great on your quiz. You can remember there's 3 negatives and 2 negatives. Altogether, there are 5 negatives. Now, the next one says -7 plus 5. And what was that? -2. And you can look at it as there are 7 negatives. 3, 6, 7.
Do
Five
it loud, die, die,
positives.
die. Do it, die, die, die.
All the ones come together that are the same and positive and negative wipe each other out. -2. Then we get to the next type, which says 4 minus -4. You see that, what do you automatically think?
0.
It's not 0,
No.
Addition.
right?
Oh, yeah,
Circle
because
agregar,
Yeah, boy.
circle add, 4 plus 4 is 8. Then we get to the fourth question on the quiz, which was 5n plus 9n, and this gets very interesting from a teacher perspective. 5n's plus 9n, almost every person in the room got this correct. What are 5n's plus 9n's? 14n's. Now notice, it's a lot like this one in red here. The one in red is to say there are 3 negatives and 2 negatives, Dan. So altogether I get 5 negatives, so the answer is -5. And I think just about every person in the room got that right. And I think just about every person in the room got the one in black right. I think just like you can say there are 3 negatives and 2 negatives make 5 negatives, or 3 puppy dogs and 2 puppy dogs make 5 puppy
Die,
dogs,
die, die.
or 3 pairs of jeans and 2 pairs of jeans make 5 pairs of jeans. I think everybody gets that. I think everybody's doing really well with it. Then they look over here and they say, okay, I got 5n's, I got 9n's, I get 14n's, and everything looks really, really good. And then we do this question.
Die, die.
2x squareds and -3x squareds. And the first thing I notice is that some kids write x's for their answer.
What?
Guys, if I start with n's and I get more n's, what did my answer end up being? N's. So if I have x squareds and I add to it more x squareds, what am I going to get?
X squared.
X squareds. Whatever you add or subtract on the face of the earth, whatever you combine on the face of the earth, you can only combine things that are alike. And that thing will stay the same at the end. Remember the example I gave in class the other day? I said you go out shopping, and you go buy yourself 2 pairs of jeans, and then you buy 3 pairs of jeans. You get home, you open up the bag, you don't
5
find 5
undies.
shirts
No,
or
5
5 undies, you find 5 pairs of jeans. So whenever I add a subtract, and if you buy 2 pairs of shoes, and then you buy 3 more pairs of shoes, you don't come home, open up the bag, and find 5 puppy dogs.
No, I wish.
You find pairs of shoes. Okay, so the only other part of this is the famous Rosenberger quote,
Hey.
I would have gotten it right. Oh, I got it right, except for the negative. If I have positive 2 and I have negative 3 and I add them all up and combine them, I get negative x squared, not positive x squared. And probably 5 of you guys did that same mistake. You put positive x squared instead of negative x squared. One way to look at it is you're going to keep the sign of the bigger number. Another way to look at it is to say, look, I got 2 positives and 3 negatives. Die.
No, die.
1 negative when we're done. Okay, next. Hey. Next up. Just some real quick answers here. I'll put them up and then anything you want to go over, we can go over. Because in the last class, I ran out of time and I don't want that to happen in this class. 5 negatives, 2 negatives make 7 negatives. Negative 8 and negative 3 make negative 11. Circle R, rig R, 4 plus 4 is 8. Now, this is a little bit different, and this is what we talked about yesterday. You want to make sure that you understand, whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, you need to change the first sign. 8 times negative 5 is negative 40. When you multiply by 5, 8 times 5 is 40, but you also multiply by that negative, so you have to negate the 8, so it becomes negative 40. Next, negative 8 times negative 5 is positive 40. Again, you're multiplying by, 8 times 5 is 40, I'm multiplying by a negative, which means I have to change that first sign. This was a negative, I have to change it to a positive. And then negative 20 divided by 4, now I'm dividing by a positive, so I keep the sign the same, stop. And you end up getting negative 5 out of it. Any questions? Are they good, Gus? Okay. Mark says the product of 3 negative numbers is positive because there's this rule that says whenever the signs are the same, the answer is positive. Is that true or false?
False.
Why is it false? Give me an example.
Because you're wrong.
Well, why don't we do one? Right?
Why not?
Let's do negative 2
Do it.
times negative 3 times negative 4. What's negative 2 times negative 3? Positive 6. Right? Because when I multiply by this negative, I have to change that sign, so it becomes positive. Now what's 6 times negative 4? Negative 24. Because 6 times 4 is 24, and when I multiply by this negative, I have to change that first sign, it becomes negative 24. So notice, the signs were the same. They were all negative, yet the answer came out to be negative, not positive. So whoever taught you this idea of whenever the signs are the same, it's positive is wrong. So we like to do this rule that says when I multiply or divide by a negative, I change the sign. When I multiply or divide by a positive, I keep the sign. That to me is the safest and best way to do this. All right. Now, let's scroll down a little bit and let's take, I would say, about 3 minutes to look over the answers to last night's homework. So let's do that now. Okay. Now, the way that this scanner scanned it in today was a little crazy. It did it upside down. So part of it's right side up, part of it's upside down. Take a look here. What's the order of operations? Parentheses. And then next is exponents. Multiply, divide left to right, add, subtract left to right. Remember that?
PEMDAS, so
PEMDAS. Yeah, but I did with 4 blanks, I wanted the 4 steps. Okay, next. What does evaluate mean? I distinctly remember being young and being confused about what the word evaluate meant. Evaluate means tell me the value of. Now, you're going to have to look upside down. How do you evaluate 10 to the 5th power? 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. For those of you who like rules, again, I'm not a big rule guy, I'd rather model it. But for those of you who like rules, how do you add if the signs are the same? You add, keep the sign. How do you add if the signs are different? You subtract, keep sign a bigger number. Is there really such a thing as subtraction? No. Okay, it's just adding the opposite, so subtraction is a roundabout way to add. What's your favorite way to remember multiply or divide? We just went over it. If you multiply or divide by a positive, you keep the sign. By a negative, you change the sign. Yes?
How come there's no such thing as subtraction?
Because if you look it up in the dictionary, it says add the opposite. So while there clearly is such a thing as subtraction, it's really just another form of addition. So since it's really a form of addition, we just learn the addition rules. We don't have to learn new rules for subtraction. Okay. Next up, number 1 is 1. I hope you remember this absolute value. It means make things positive. Okay. Absolute value means distance from 0, so it wants to keep things positive. Number 2 is 9. There's some values right there. Again, some basic, you should know how to do these kind of things. Basic integers that we've been going over the last few days. If you can get really strong with integers, if integers become the kind of thing that you can get right all the time, that frees you up to concentrate on the math of specific problems, and I think you'll see yourself doing a whole lot better this year. Okay? Notice, this is a sum problem, which means add. I got x's and x's, I get x's. And then from goes first here, I put the 2y first. Then I subtract the 7y, that's negative 5y. Okay? And here are some last questions to look at. Question?
Can I get a drink?
You're going to have to wait a little bit. How are we looking here, guys? Good? Okay. All right. And then we did each product or quotient. Any problem on numbers 15 to 24? Be prepared. There are some homeworks where I purposely give you wrong answers and see if you can catch me. Okay? All right, any others? All right. So now we get back to today's lesson. And it asks you to write as factors. I would like you to write the top two, the 5x to the third and the 5 to the third, x to the third, as factors. A factor is something you multiply. So write it out as something that would be multiplied. Okay, so the first one says 5x to the third. And if I was to write that out as a series of factors, I would write that out like this. Hold on, I gotta put this on here. 5, and then x. 5x to the third. Because what I'm trying to emphasize here is this exponent, 3, only refers to the x. That's the only thing it applies to because that's the only thing it's next to. As opposed to the next one, which says 5 to the third, x to the third, this one is going to be what? Who knows? Go ahead.
5, x, x.
That's right. 5 times 5 times 5 times x times x times x.
Doesn't x equal 1?
Very good. No, I don't know what x equals. I'm just writing an expression using factors. Okay? Now, what do you think this would be? 5x to the third, in parentheses this time. What do you think that means? How does that exponent affect things? Michael? Mike, you gotta have you get it ahead of the game, buddy. Go ahead.
Is it 5x, x, and then 3?
See, this exponent of 3,
Wouldn't it be
because
5x
this
to
is
the
in
third power?
package, it means 5x times 5x times 5x.
Oh, so I got it
Because
right.
the whole package is to the third power. What do you think this would be?
4x to the second power. So
4x
4x.
times 4x. Good. Okay, so I think we're understanding a little bit better the role of an exponent. What do you think 10 to the 5th means? You don't have to figure out what it equals. I just want to know how to write it out as a series of factors. Dan?
10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10.
Very good. 10 I write it out 10 times. 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Now, what about 4n to the 5th? What do you think we got there? Go ahead.
4n times n times n times n times n times n.
Good. 4 times n. 4n to the 5th. Very good. Now, it says to evaluate. Now, evaluate is different. The first set of instructions said to write as factors, so I wrote it out as factors. This is telling me to evaluate. Evaluate tells me the value of. Now, tell me the value of 10 to the 3rd. This is setting up a lesson in a couple of days when we talk about, it's not third. We talk about scientific notation. It is 1,000, very good. Because 10 to the 3rd means 10 times 10, which is 100, times another 10, which is 1,000. Now, I want you to notice something that only works for the number 10 because it ends in a 0. How many zeros are in this answer? 3. And what was the exponent? 3. That only works for the number 10. It doesn't work for any other number because of these examples. What's that? Well, 20 will work to an extent. If you do 20 to the 3rd, you will get your 3 exponents after, but it's going to be 8 in the beginning. So the last part, yes, but the first part, no. Because 1 works because it's 1 times 1 times 1, which is just 1. Okay, next up, 10 to the 4th. Now that you see the trick, how can you do that very quickly off the top of your head? Alan?
Well, it would be 10,000,
It is 10,000, very good. Which is 4 zeros to match the exponents. Nicely done. Okay. Now, let's take a look at a couple of tables that we have here. The way I'm going to fill in the first table, I'll start it for you. I'm going to take a 1 and I'm going to put it in place of n. See, it says n is 1. So what is 3 to the 1 power?
3n. No, it's 3.
Just 3. I'm putting the 1 in for n. You try the next 2 boxes. 3 to the 2nd and 3 to the 3rd. Give everybody a chance to catch up. Anybody here play on a girls' tennis team?
I do.
If you could ask your coach if they have any dead tennis balls,
Got it.
because I put them on the chairs.
She just threw them into the field yesterday.
Tell her if she gets any dead tennis balls, I can really use them.
Okay.
All right, I put them on the bottom of the chair so they slide easy on the floor.
What's it then? Tennis ball?
Okay. All right, so what is this one? 3 to the 2nd.
9.
Good, and 3 to the 3rd?
27.
27, very good. Now, the next one says -2 to the n power. What's -2 to the first power? -2, that's always easy, because to the first power is itself. What's -2 squared? -2 squared. That means -2 times -2. What is -2 times -2? 4. Good. Hey, notice that sign change. What about -2 to the 3rd power?
Isn't it?
Not 6.
No.
-8.
Yeah.
Because if I put another -2 there, 2 times 2 is,
4.
times 2 is,
8.
and then I get a negative times this negative makes it positive, but then times another negative
Plus the positive.
changes it again to make it back into a negative. Notice the pattern, negative, positive, negative. What do you think the next one's gonna be?
Negative.
Slow down. Do you think it's gonna be positive or negative?
Positive.
Positive, good. And what's the number value?
12. No, right?
16, watch. What's -2 times -2? 4. Remember we talked yesterday about the commutative property of multiplication? I could switch the order. So what's -2 times -2 again? 4. And what's 4 times 4? 16. Okay? So the thing that I notice here is that when I bring a power and I'm taking a negative number to a power, the sign's going to change every single time. Let me ask you a question. Do the odd numbers make a negative answer, or do the even numbers make a negative answer? By that I mean the value of n. If the n is odd versus the n is even. If it's odd, like 1 and 3, the answer turns out to be negative. And if it's even, like 2 and 4, the answer turns out to be, what's the answer turn out to be? Positive. Okay, that might help you with this one. That might help you with this one. Try it. Okay, what's negative 1 to the first power? Negative 1. What's negative 1 to the second power?
Negative 2. Negative 4.
1. It means negative 1 times negative 1.
So the whole thing is one.
What's 1 times 1?
1.
1. And then when I negate the negative, it becomes a positive. What's next?
Positive.
Negative.
Negative 1. What's next?
1.
What's next?
Negative 1.
What's next?
Negative 1.
What's next?
Negative 1.
And on forever. What would negative 1 to the 999th power be?
I don't know.
No, 900. No.
It'd be negative 1 because it's an odd exponent. What would negative 1 to the 1000 be? 1. Okay, good. Next up.
Woody.
We said the other day, anything to the 0 power is 1. Later in the year, we'll explain why. Anything to the 0 is 1. X to the negative 2 is 1 over x squared. Let's do, everybody stand. Stand up. Some things are best addressed in the military fashion. Hut! And hut, soldier! I'm going to say, negative exponent. You're all going to say, reciprocal, sir! Negative exponent.
Reciprocal, sir.
That's stump. Negative exponent.
Reciprocal, sir.
A little power to the voice. Negative exponent.
Reciprocal, sir.
Negative exponent, reciprocal, sir. So therefore, 3 to the negative 2 is 1 over 3 to the positive 2. 2 to the negative third is 1 over 2 to the 3. What's anything to the 0?
1.
1. 4 to the negative 2. 1 over
Stand up, small.
4 to the positive 2. Look. Negative 2, positive 2. Negative 2, positive 2. Negative 3, positive 3. Negative 2, positive 2. 1 to the negative 10 is
Positive.
1 over 1 to the 10. Negative 2 to the negative 3 is up. 1 over
2 to positive.
negative 2 to the 3. 2/3 to the negative 2. 1 over 2/3 to the 2. Now, remember how I said reciprocal, sir? This is equal to 3/2 squared. Okay, tomorrow we'll take a little bit more work at that point in time.
He's here.
Whenever you see word practice or homework, you go all the way to the end. Yep.
Language you scared me. Like Mr. Language you scared me. Good. Oh, you forgot the Cheerio and all the goodbyes in different languages.
Yes, hasta la vista, vaya con Dios, toodaloo, ta-ta. Ciao, arrivederci, adios amigos y amigas. Cheerio!
Tip your way.
Carus, Gaddafish!
Don't like miss anything.
Tip your waitresses. Now.